Hi and welcome to this next presentation here at ABG Investor Days. My name is Simon Granat and I work as an equity analyst at ABG, covering IT and technology companies. And with us today we have MilDef and its CEO Björn Karlsson, who will present the company for about 20 minutes, and then we will follow up with a 5-minute Q&A session or similar. So with that said, Björn, please go ahead and present.
Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you everyone for taking the time to listen in to MilDef today. My name is Björn Karlsson. I'm the CEO of the company since 2018, been with the company since 2015, and I have a history before that in another publicly listed company called Readsoft. I usually have our CFO with me on these things, but he's now counting all the money in the bank accounts, so I will do this myself. Next slide, please. Today I wanted to take you through a short agenda where we introduce MilDef's universe for those of you who do not know us from before. I'll talk a little bit about the dynamics of a new world. Some of the recent world events have also impacted and are changing the MilDef universe, and we'll talk about that. Then we'll look at MilDef in numbers, specifically for the first quarter, which we recently announced. We'll of course take a look into the future, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So next slide, please. We'll start here. We'll rewind 25 years ago. In 1997, MilDef was founded here in Helsingborg in Sweden. It's a Swedish company, and about a year ago we launched the company on Nasdaq Stockholm. We made the IPO on June 4th of 2021. We're now more than 200 employees across 5 countries, and we'll get back to which those countries are pretty soon. Our core markets are here in the Nordics, in the rest of the EU, and in selected NATO countries. We do business with governments, that's roughly 50% of the revenue streams, and with other global security and defense companies. The product portfolio consists of hardware, software, and services. And we expand this company organically through the work we have and the portfolio we have, through a partner network that is growing, especially across Europe, and also through acquisitions. Next slide, please. And if we look into what we do, and to put it simply, we digitalize the world. We do so where the stakes are the highest, where the requirements are the toughest, and when technology has game-changing potential. And I'll start where the stakes are the highest. If we look at the pictures here, at the bottom left, you see a vehicle standing in the desert in a country called Mali. Inside you have Swedish UN peacekeeping military personnel. And on the right-hand side, just behind the windscreen, sits MilDef technology, showing maps, and running communications, making sure that this vehicle does not go into the wrong place and stays at the right place. This technology must work all the time, day and night, whether it's 50 degrees hot or whether it's 20 degrees minus in the nights. So this is where the stakes are the highest. You have some other examples. A COVID-19 field hospital where our equipment is being used, patrolling the coasts of Sweden and other nations, protecting the country, and also doing things like fighting forest fighters. That's where the stakes are the highest, and that's where we digitalize the world. Next slide, please. Where the requirements are the toughest, this technology cannot be regular technology that we use in our offices. It has to withstand the tests of nature. It has to be used in very difficult circumstances. You can put our technology on an iceberg, or you can put it in the desert, and you can run it through anything that would break normal IT equipment. Our solutions cannot fail, and they don't. So where the requirements are the toughest is also where we digitalize. Next slide, please. So finally, when technology has game-changing potential, it has to make sense to use technology. And we find our customers in the security and defense primarily, and we deliver hardware, software, and services. So digitalization, everything from things that can think, computers, things that can talk, networking equipment, and things that can remember, storage, and we also provide power and so on. We also deliver the software that is used to deploy this equipment, and we deliver the services necessary to integrate them. Next slide, please. So our domain, our offering spans multiple domains. The cyber domain, of course, is not just for land, it's not just for air, it's not just for marine or naval applications. Our products and services exist on land, in the air, on the water, and even underneath the water surface. Next slide, please. And if we look on a map here, we can see where we have concentrated the MilDef business. You can see the countries where we have our own offices. Here in the Nordics, where we are very strong, but we also have offices in the UK and in the US. We have partners who address other important markets, such as Germany, which is also marked here on the map. As I said before, the revenue streams into this company comes 50% from government, and the other 50% comes from other industrial customers. And we do business here in the Nordics, where we have spent 25 years doing business. We have a unique position on the market. But using our technology and leveraging that on the bigger defense market also has fantastic potential. You can see some examples of our customers on the bottom of the screen here. You can also see some of the applications for it. Usually we digitalize different types of platforms, vehicles, airplanes, or ships. That is what we do. Next slide, please. And if we zoom in and look at those things that we deliver, we talk about tactical IT, and the hardware side of things you can see on the picture here. Things like a laptop that you probably have in your office right now, but these laptops can stand a little more than spilling coffee on them. They can withstand any type of difficult situation that they are put into. And if you see the picture here on the left-hand side, you can see basically what it looks like to take an IT landscape from an office and put it in the back of a vehicle. So you have taken the server room and you put it on the back of a vehicle, and you have taken all of the user equipment and you put it out in this type of scenario where, as I said before, it can get very hot, very cold, it can get bumpy, it can get very dark, it can rain, and lots of things can happen and the equipment still works. We deliver things like laptops, tablets, and handhelds. We deliver rack-mounted IT equipment like servers and storage solutions and networking equipment. We deliver special projects like robot controllers to control those things that fly or crawl or swim on the surface. We deliver intelligent displays that can also be read in the night or in direct sunlight. We deliver tracking solutions that communicate via satellite if there's no GSM or LTE coverage, and we deliver all the accessories that you need, keyboards, mice, and things like that. We also deliver the services that you need to find out which type of equipment do you need, where do you need it, when do you need it, and we're also part of installing it, and we're also part of training it, so we cover the full life cycle of tactical IT with our services. And finally, we also provide software that helps you deploy these types of systems that are NATO compatible, which means that if you are a NATO country using our software, you're able to communicate effectively with other NATO countries. Next slide, please. So things have changed a little bit in the world, and as everyone knows, on February 24th, our world changed dramatically with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And this, of course, has an impact on all of our society in a number of different ways, and it has some specific impacts on the defense industry that we operate in. And one of those, of course, is the fact that we now have more defense spending and larger defense budgets going forward. If we look in Sweden, we are going from roughly 1.3% of GDP up to 2% of GDP. And we see similar situations in a lot of NATO countries, coming from numbers around 1.1 up to 1.4% GDP, aiming for those 2% that we also have as the limit to aim for in NATO countries and the agreed upon budgets to use. We also have the fact that Sweden has applied for NATO membership together with Finland, which is impacting things. We have the fact that electronics and digitalization is becoming a more and more important part of designing and building defense capabilities in this world. And this is what we do in MilDef. So we need to think about these factors, these macro factors that are affecting our industry, our ability to deliver, also our opportunities to grow in the future on those markets where we operate today and also where we aim for tomorrow. So this new world order is something that we take very seriously and we think about a lot, and I'll come back to that at the end when we talk about the future outlook. Most of this from a business perspective for us in MilDef are positive opportunities because we see increased spending and increased awareness, a new ESG perspective on security and defense that is now ESG positive. And that is, of course, impacting us as a company. Next slide, please. We'll now go through some of the Q1 numbers. And if we look at the first quarter, it was a strong quarter for us. And I want to emphasize that, of course, what we did in the first quarter has nothing to do with the recent events in the world. This has everything to do with the things that we worked on in 2021. And some of those things were a little bit difficult, like the semiconductor component shortage, but we still managed in the first quarter to improve our revenues up to 141.3 million Swedish kronor, which is a 177% increase. So we are growing pretty quickly in the first quarter, and we're of course happy about that. That also led to an adjusted EBITDA of 6.3 million, which is for the first time in the first quarter a positive from a profitability perspective. And this has to do with the seasonality of our business, which traditionally, being more of a hardware company, usually is geared towards the end of the year. Now that we have introduced more and more services and software, the revenue streams are kind of shifting a little bit, which is very positive for us, reducing the volatility and also allows us to be profitable throughout the year. We look at the order intake. This is of course important. This is our future revenues. We have a healthy increase of 31%, and we have a positive operating cash flow, of course, generated by these positive numbers that we see above. So all in all, this is a quarter of fantastic growth, and it is based on the performance of a very interesting 2021, which had its difficulties. It was still a year of pandemics. It was a year where we have a lot of component shortage, and we struggled a little bit with that. We moved and delayed some deliveries into the first half of this year, and some of that is included in these numbers that you see here on the screen right now. So huge quarter for us and a nice growth quarter. Next slide, please. If we look at this, we zoom out a little bit, we look at this at a long-term perspective. We start from 2016. You'll see that we have a 24% CAGR over those years. And on the right-hand side, you see the last 12 months. So this is a theoretical year. It's the last 12 months, and you can see that the growth trend is continuing in a very healthy way. So it's a long-term trend of overperforming against the market growth, which during this period has been somewhere around 3 to 4%. Next slide, please. The order backlog is at an all-time high. It's up 50% versus the first quarter of 2021. And it's worth mentioning here that not everything in the order book is to be delivered during the present year. We have more and more orders that are planned over a number of years. And we like that because this reduces the volatility of the business. It makes it possible for us to dimension the business and production plan in a very effective way. But we also like the fact that the order backlog is of course growing all the time, which is healthy. Next slide, please. So if we look into the balance sheet after the first quarter, we have a negative net debt, which means that we have a lot of money in the bank. When we made the IPO about a year ago, one of the things we wanted to do was to receive a capital injection to fuel our M&A engine. And we've already used it twice for 2 acquisitions from last year, both of them very successful, but we still have some power left with our negative net debt to do more. So very strong current cash position. And we also, of course, then have a negative net debt versus EBITDA ratio. And our long-term financial target allows us to have a 2.5 times EBITDA debt. So that creates an additional space for us. And the thing we're going to use it for is especially for the M&A arena. And of course, a very healthy equity versus asset ratio because of all of these things. So very healthy balance sheet. Next slide, please. So the financial summary for the first quarter, sales grew 177%, order intake grew 31%. We continue to improve our gross margin, aiming to go a little bit higher even as we progress. Positive EBITDA margin, a great improvement, all-time high on net sales last 12 months, and a 24% CAGR revenue growth since 2016. The order backlog is at an all-time high, and we have a nice financial position with a healthy balance sheet. This is important, not to brag about a great quarter, because it shows that this company is healthy and in a good shape to take on the new dynamics that I talked about in the world that we live in today, that is dramatically different than it used to be before. Next slide, please. And I want to look now into some of those future things that have been impacted by these recent changes, because what happens in Ukraine is of course having a ripple effect across all of the world. And all of the nations, including Sweden, are reacting and acting, and doing so in a proactive way, looking to do things here and now, but also in the future. So next slide, please. I'll talk about 5 things that you can expect from MilDef going forward. The first of those is that we have what I think is a pretty ambitious strategy for how we want to grow this business. I talked about it before, organic growth, because we have a lot of technology potential that is untapped in our portfolio. A partner growth, we have a network that we are expanding that we can use to resell the things that we have, the things that we do, and also through M&A activities. We made 2 acquisitions last year, one of those into the services space and one of those into software. And both of those have created a new situation for MilDef where we can do more and offer more to our customers. And this is the perfect time to do so. But even with this rather ambitious growth strategy, we now have to recalibrate for a new world, increase defense spending, increase demands on those supplying, and a totally new world order. So expect us to recalibrate and try to make the most of the situation that is positive. We also see, and this is a huge change for us, a focal point new movement. We used to be able to see 6 to 9 months into the future. We now have discussions with our customers that are 3 to 5 years ahead. We really are revolutionizing our capacity planning with this new time scale, that it makes it much easier for us to dimension this business, and as I said before, to do proper production planning. So it makes us more effective, it makes us a stronger supplier, and it also makes it easier for us to be able to invest at the right time with the right things. You can expect us to provide stronger, what we call one-stop shop capabilities. When our customers need tactical IT, they should talk to us. Across digitalization, everything from a digitalization project, the hardware included, the services needed to implement, to integrate, to educate, and the software needed to deploy. You can get that from MilDef. We do that on the smaller to mid-sized defense markets. But the fourth point is also important. On the bigger defense markets, and you saw UK and US on the map, we're a specialist supplier. We're sharp as a needle with the technology, the Swedish technology that we produce here, and that we are able to deliver and leverage the ambitions of other nations, including local manufacture and other things needed for an effective supply chain. And the fifth point, I think it's clear as the world now changes, that we are able to expand our customer base, not just geographically into new nations, or not just in volume with people doing more of the same, but also into adjacent market segments. And that is also something to look out for in the future as we continue to grow this business. And I'm running a little bit out of time here, but I think maybe I have a minute or two to just summarize this. And for those of you new to MilDef and what we do, remember these first sentences that we said, that we digitalize the world, where the requirement, sorry, we digitalize the world where the stakes are the highest, where the requirements are the toughest, and when technology has game-changing potential. That is what we do. We deliver tactical IT in hardware, software, and services. We're a Swedish company. We're 25 years old, and we have just started this journey. Thank you for listening to these first 20 or so minutes, and it's now time for some difficult questions.
Thank you so much for a great presentation, Björn. I think you really captured the essence of this company. Initially, I'd like to stay on the NATO topic, and as we are now recently having, probably we'll see, but if Sweden is accepted into NATO, would you say that that will change your conversations with customers, given that it will now be a NATO-credited company from that sense?
To some extent it will. I mean, we have operations in NATO countries today. We have Norway, for example, and we have the US and the UK. But we are a Swedish company, and we are listed as a Swedish company on Nasdaq Stockholm. So being on the inside of NATO opens up for a number of new dialogues, and it creates an environment. As you know, people like to do business with people they know. And with NATO, there's a kind of a hidden currency that is of a security type, political security, and we get access to it being on the inside. And for companies working in this space, it adds credibility, and it makes it a little bit easier to have some conversations. We become more strategic, and we become a different type of friend to some of these countries.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And you also touched upon on the subject a little bit, but how long are the lead times in general for your business, given the recent news about increased military spending that we are seeing across several countries?
Yeah, I think, and if I expand on your question, I mean, we have lead times first for the actual business. So usually when we look into business, it could be up to a year of lead time before we talk about the business, before we have an order in our hands. And then depending on if this is a new product or an existing product, it could be 3 months before we deliver, or it could be another year before we deliver. So the dynamics are, I mean, that's roughly the dynamics we talk about. What we see now is that we still have issues with lead times on component level. So semiconductor component shortage is still here. Even though we have practiced and trained on it, it's still a very relevant problem, and it needs to be addressed. What we see now in the world, and I've stated this as well in the first quarter report that we made, is that I expect for companies like us, expect it to take 1, 2, or 3 quarters before this is reflected into the order books. Because this is a process, and everyone in every nation is now going back to strategize, to count what you have and figure out what you need. So there is a little bit of a delay before you will actually see this into the order books of companies such as ourselves.
Thank you. You also talked a little bit about perhaps expanding into adjacent markets. Why hasn't that happened so far, or what could be a potential new adjacent markets for you?
I mean, one of them, of course, for us is focus. We want to be really good at what we do, and we want to make sure that we have a customer that we understand. But the space that we understand, which is defense, is now expanding. So instead of talking about defense as military defense, we talk more about total defense, which includes all of society, protecting the critical infrastructure of societies. That includes things like police and ambulance, which are obvious, or Coast Guard, but also the health sector, the energy sector, the logistics sector, where there is a need to have equipment and services and software such as ours that can withstand difficult situations. So I think that the concept of defense itself is expanding, and as that expands, we aim to follow that expansion.
And as a final question, you talked when you touched upon the gross margin that you are aiming a little bit higher. Would you say what would you say are the key drivers in order to do so? Is this a sales mix? Is more cheap components, etc.?
I think that one thing that we have done and continue to do is that we are expanding our offering from being a pure hardware supplier to delivering a full spectrum digitalization service. So when you have the hardware, software, and services, you get an increased margin because there's added value into what you offer. And I think it's as simple as that. And of course, now also that we have a situation with growth, accelerated growth, there's also an understanding that for us to be able to deliver for a long time and deliver the best technology in the world, we also need to have a reasonable margin so we can reinvest that into R&D, into innovation and other areas that are important for the long term. So we see an understanding from our customers, an increased importance of what we do, and a wider scope and added value into what we deliver. And that justifies also a higher margin.
Thank you so much. Again, I want to emphasize a great presentation, and thank you so much for attending here today, Björn.
Thank you very much.
Take care.